I will be eternally grateful to the freedom truckers. Because
nobody in Parliament, nobody was standing up for us. No.
You've got these two groups of people that were not particularly involved in the formation of the convoy or much of the freedom movement in 2021.
Thank you so much, Phil. You're awesome for bringing the man, paying attention to what's going on. You've got your eye on the whole media, what's going on in Canada, while you're able to hold a thread of what's happening in the U.S. and the rest of the world. You've got a great brain for this, bro.
A video clip surfaced from June of last year when he was running in his leadership campaign.
You have to be a member of the Conservative Party by Friday. So get your membership at my website, year4pm.ca.
No UN. As soon as he's seen that, the whole telemetry of the situation changed now. All I can say is we need to find out what it is.
There's a shot here. Oh, yeah. Fire away. Yes. Yes. I haven't read it.
And here we have Pierre Poilievre standing in front of a Mason's symbol.
The mainstream media isn't picking it up. Why? The answer is very simple, because the executives of most of the mainstream media deserve to go to prison.
I did not call people who were unvaccinated names.
What just happened? Did somebody just drop dead?
That's how business in politics is done. The insiders get paid handsome money from these corporate interests. These insiders control the access to the premiers and the prime minister. And if you pay them highly enough, pay them well enough, they'll make sure that your interest is taken care of through legislation and policy. That's how it works.
That's disgraceful.
And it's, the mafia family red, the mafia family blue, the mafia family orange. Okay, it doesn't make and they all know it.
Yeah.
They all have their preferred customers and clients, but they're all in on the game.
We are as media for the people, by the people. And what does that mean? That means you too can be a contributor. You too can help us get the messages from the mainstream media to the people without the mainstream filtered bias and government slant that comes along with most of the mainstream media. Some people like to call them the legacy media. I like to call them the cathedral media.
Well, good afternoon, good evening. It's great to be on Newfoundland video. For those who aren't aware, my name is Randy Hillier. I'm a former, or I guess retired, elected representative. I spent 15 years in the Ontario legislature observing and calling out the corruption and scandals in Ontario politics. But my family's roots are from Newfoundland. My dad's from Trinity Bay, and my mom was from Corner Brook. So it's a pleasure to see fellas, men and women on the rock standing up for freedom and exposing what's going on. So it's an absolute pleasure to join you with you tonight, Shane.
Excellent. We're very happy to have you again, Randy. Thank you very much. So we're going to get down to it. The episode is called, "Why is Katie Telford Suddenly Going to Testify?" We posed it as a question like that just to kind of introduce the topic, because what we're getting into really is what I had called interference, political interference from China into Canada.
Well, it is, interference signifies and indicates that it's unwanted interference. And what we've known for many decades is there is collusion between all our political parties, and not just the Communist Chinese Party, but collusion that interferes with what we believe democracy ought to be, from many corporate players in every provincial legislature and in our federal government. And it's well documented. Our RCMP and CSIS first revealed the level of collusion and how many politicians were compromised and businesses compromised by the Communist Chinese Party back to in 1997 with the Project Sidewinder, co-authored by CSIS and the RCMP. And the government of the day, I believe it was Jean Chrétien's government, quietly hid that report, refused to make it public, but copies of it are available, as you just see on screen. And it details the numbers of businesses in our real estate, in our media, in our politics that were compromised with Communist Chinese actors and criminal gangs, such as the triads in our casinos and the money laundering that it continues to this day. So it's not interference when one welcomes it and benefits from that cooperation, that collusion.
Right. So it's not interference, it's collusion, because interference would mean that it was unwanted, as you say, whereas collusion, you're getting dual consideration, which is getting close to contractual at that point. The report you mentioned, Sidewinder, they mention a lot of groups. You just named some. Like, we're talking political interference or collusion, but it's not just political in the political system. It's also businesses, it's also universities, it's also like it's more than just our politicians.
It's every institution in our country is colluding with corporate interests, and not just Communist Chinese. Many less than desirable collaborations are going on. I mean, listen, we can see that as plain as day in the last 3 years with COVID. Many, as today it was revealed in the U.S. congressional hearings that Fauci received $400 million in royalties from Moderna alone.
Moderna recently paid NIH $400 million Do you believe it creates a conflict of interest for the government employees who are making money now off of the vaccine to also be dictating the policy about how many times we have to take the vaccine?
Good morning, Senator. Indeed, we recently made, before Christmas last year, a $400 million payment to the NIH for an old patent that they had developed, not related to COVID, but useful in the development of a COVID vaccine to pay them for their work. It's for the U.S. government to assess how that money should be used.
Do you think it creates a conflict of interest for the same people deciding the policy of how often we have to take the vaccine to also be making money the more times we take the vaccine? Yes or no?
This is for the government to decide, Senator.
You have no opinion on whether or not it creates a conflict of interest.
So, you know, and to think that that only happens in the United States, well, you know, you're whistling past the graveyard here. If you think that collusion and money only is involved in U.S. politics, it's rampant here in every, like I said, every legislature and the federal government. And it's the political parties who are the ones deriving the mutual benefit from this collusion. It's not done for the best interest and welfare of Canadian citizens. It's done for the best interests of the political parties.
That's a heck of a statement. And for anybody who thinks that Mr. Hillier might be exaggerating or perhaps might view you as a quote unquote conservative and therefore might think that you have a certain slant, the things you mentioned is a perfect segue for this 1.5-minute clip of a Liberal MP from sometime last week. And I'd like the audience to listen very carefully to the words he has to say, because it's a pretty daunting statement he makes. So here we go, 1.5 minutes.
Tell me what you think should be done about the questions being raised now about what the government knew about foreign interference.
Well, my views are that this is far larger. That Canada, that the government of China is an existential threat to Canada on a multiplicity of levels, and we need to come to grips with that.
Is your government doing enough to deal with that, to confront it?
Well, it's not for me to say.
Well, you're a member of the governing caucus.
The caucus, right. But I think we need as a nation to come to grips with the desire of the government of China to turn us all into vassal states. And I don't think we have it.
So you think the public inquiry is warranted then?
No, I think we need to think our way through this very, very carefully.
Why? What's the risk of it?
Well, because it's an existential threat that we've never, ever faced before on a multiplicity of levels.
It sounds like you're saying it's more of a problem in terms of the election and the democratic process.
It's more than the election. It's at the universities, it's at the police stations, it's at the Confucius Institutes, it's at the exploitation of resources, it's at I think it's far bigger.
He said it himself. It's not just, the politics, so to speak. It's universities, police stations. It's everywhere. And that gets allowed by both parties because this isn't a quote unquote Justin Trudeau problem. We can look at Stephen Harper's government, look at the treaties that were signed under Stephen Harper with the UN, the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, and you start to think, how can this be just a liberal problem if our quote-unquote conservatives have been doing this our whole lives too?
Well, that's right. This is all the established political parties have been engaged in this, and I've often used the term, if you really want to, there's two phrases that I would use to characterize the reality of political parties. And it doesn't matter if it's the NDP, the Liberals, the Conservatives. I don't think the Greens might fall into this because they're just too new and they haven't learned how to be as good a crime family yet as the other three. But that is the best way to view a political party, an established political party, is there to peddle their favors in exchange for money and to provide legislative protection for those corporate interests or friends who pay well. So, and that doesn't matter if it's SNC Lavalin or the communist Chinese donating money to Justin Trudeau's foundation, and it's with all those political parties. What that liberal backbencher, what was the important takeaway for people to understand there is politics is all theater, and the backbenchers don't really know. They're just fillers. The backbenchers are like the extras on a movie set. They don't really know what the whole screenplay is. They don't know what the whole theme of the movie is. That's reserved for the political insiders. And occasionally, one of the extras, one of the backbenchers, wakes up and connects a few dots together and says, things aren't going the way I thought they were supposed to go. And I think that's the way, if people view this question period, Parliament, that is to put in the starring actors. If you think of the leader of the opposition and the prime minister as the starring roles, and then the cabinet as the supporting role and the backbenchers as the extras, and everything that they say to you on the movie is just a script that's been written, rehearsed, and it is meant to deceive the public from knowing what they're actually doing.
Man, I've been trying to say that condensed message for the last 5 to 6 years at least. And you said it a lot better than I've ever been able to come up with. It's a theater, right? So I said this in last night or the night before's stream. I said this exact words. The way I described it is you're now in the Fourth Reich of Rome, basically, and you're at the Colosseum and you're watching the theater happen. You're watching the senators do their thing on the floor, and you're just kind of watching it all happen. That's it. And you hit the nail on the head. It's a script. Yeah. It's all happening. The way I like to describe, because people say left wing and right wing. So if there's a left wing and a right wing, that means they're part of a bird. And that bird is the same body, whether you're on one wing or the other. And that bird is going to a destination that brain is going to bring it to, not the wings. The brain is going to tell the wings where to go. So it doesn't matter what wing you fall on if you're playing the government game, like you found out, I think. You were kind of talking about yourself a little bit there when you were describing Mackie, when you said, a government official who kind of wakes up and realizes what's happening.
Well, it takes a while to learn. It takes, it took me a few years in elected office to actually understand how the script was being played out and who was writing the script, because there's all the unseen actors just like in a movie. You don't see who the producer is, you don't see who the director is, you don't see who the stagehands are. And it's the same thing in politics. It takes a while to figure out who is actually in control and who is writing the scripts. So you have to be observant. You have to be awake and alert. But most backbenchers are quite happy to accept their nice paycheck and be handed their script and go along their merry way without having to think or to do much, right? But okay, I was not that type of individual. I was a little bit more curious and inquisitive, and I, had some inkling about how corrupt politics were before I got in there. So when I saw companies offering money to me to advance legislation that would benefit them, and seeing the blowback from the party if I refused to introduce that legislation. And I often ended up in the penalty box for that very reason, because I want, it's against the law to advance legislation for money. That should be, Even if it wasn't a law, it should be an unethical, immoral thing to do. But it is against the law as well. But as we saw with, the best example of late was the SNC, where with Jody Wilson-Raybould, who was removed from cabinet because the money that SNC was paying to get the deferred prosecution, she wasn't buying it. Well, okay, you're not reading the script very well, Jody. We're going to have to get a new supporting actor in here, and somebody who will support the screenplay that we've written. And so all of this, it's not interference. It is downright collusion. It's corrupt. It's a distortion. It's a perversion of what Canadians believe a representative democracy is supposed to function and do for people.
That is fantastic. That is exactly what I wanted to bring us to. But you made one quick point that I want to point out. Companies approaching you or people in your position in the Ontario legislature to what I call pay for favors, offer money to advance legislation, that's paying for a favor, right? Yeah. Whether that's the Chinese government, the Italian government, or a local company, at the end of the day, that erodes what we believe, or at least what I thought and believe now to be what a democratic nation does and how it proceeds. So whether it's Chinese, collusion or interference, whichever way you're looking at it, it doesn't matter. To me, it doesn't matter where it's coming from. The fact that it's able to happen, the fact that the system is set up not only to allow it, but to protect them while it happens is a disgrace.
Absolutely. It's not just that it's set up to do this. Our laws are actually set up with our integrity commissioners and our various apparent watchdog and oversight mechanisms. They're there not to prevent wrongdoing. They're there to protect the myth. They're there to protect people's belief that our institutions and our democracy are functional. And that's why you see these little, how many times has Justin Trudeau been in violation of the Integrity Act? Half a dozen times or whatnot. And, the Integrity Commissioner always downplays him, and, you put a $100 fine or a $200 penalty. And it's just, every unethical behavior is glossed over and diminished. But what is important is you never see the big ones, okay? You never see just how corrupt it is. And that's why I go back to, think of it as a crime family that is running a protection racket. So whatever let's say business A could be a bunch of fishermen, not likely. It'll probably be more likely a bunch of lawyers or accountants or maybe Walmart or Giant Tiger, because we saw during COVID, for example, there was a number of businesses that were permitted to stay open while all the other small guys were shut down. That wasn't just coincidence, okay? It was not just a fluke and a flip of a coin. That's how business in politics is done. The insiders get paid handsome money from these corporate interests. These insiders control the access to the premiers and the prime minister. And if you pay them highly enough, pay them well enough, they'll make sure that your interest is taken care of through legislation and policy. That's how it works.
That's disgraceful.
And it's, the mafia family red, the mafia family blue, the mafia family orange. Okay, it doesn't make and they all know it.
Yeah.
They all have their preferred customers and clients, but they're all in on the game.
All right, I've got a question for you because you mentioned the setup of the system, how it's set up to, not only allow but protect what's happening here, what's occurring. So my question, as the politicians are investigating themselves right now to see if they did wrong, as the cops so often do, RCMP will do something horrible and then they'll investigate themselves to see if they did anything wrong. And the system is seemingly set up that way through legislation. I read a lot of legislation, federal and provincial, not just my own province, right? So I can go back to right from the BNA Act that set up our quote-unquote constitution from 1867. That sets up the structure that we're in. Right there, right? That's the governing document of Parliament. And I want to bring up one thing. I know this applies federally. I'm almost certain it applies provincially, at least it does for mine. When the people elect you, and I'll say you because you're on my screen and you've been there. When the people elect you, your riding decides as a whole, we want you to represent us, be our elected representative in the House. Federally, at the very least, I can say with confidence that there are some oaths that need to be sworn before that member can take their seat. Federally, there is an oath of secrecy to Parliament, and there's an oath of allegiance to now His Majesty the King, was Her Majesty the Queen. Two of those oaths, whether you want to say they're ceremonial or whatnot, the fact that you have to verbalize an oath of allegiance to the monarchy and an oath of secrecy to Parliament should give you an idea of the type of system that's set up.
So in the Ontario Parliament, there's not an oath of secrecy unless there is something if you're in cabinet, okay? There is, but just as an elected member, there is no oath of secrecy. But you do swear your allegiance to the crown. And of course, because the crown is supposed to represent the ideal of a representative democracy, where the crown, except for those exceptional reserve powers, is left as a silent guardian of the democracy, but subservient to it. So that's the foundational understanding. That's what the crown is supposed to be. The fount of all knowledge, the fount of all righteousness, the head of the church in the UK, like moral, ethical, above reproach, right? Well, it turns out, they're not quite so perfect, and I don't know how less perfect they are than politicians. I always understood it. My first allegiance was to my own conscience. My own moral compass was where my allegiance was first and foremost. The second was my allegiance to my constituents, that I would represent them to my best ability. And far down and long after is the allegiance to the political party, right? But most, and because, if you've read the BNA Act, if you read our Constitution and our legislation, political parties were never envisioned in our Constitution. They morphed and transformed and evolved over time. Originally, there were no political parties. You voted for the individual in your riding, and then those individuals would coalesce within the legislature or coalesce within the parliament to form cohesive groups, and then they would elect or select the leader of their party.
Yes.
And so the leader of the
Prime
party
Minister wasn't even mentioned in the original. Not only political parties, but the role that we see as Prime Minister right now wasn't even mentioned in our original documents.
That's right. Because it was, the term we used to use was um, the premier or the prime minister would be the first among equals. Like there was no special status envisioned, and but more importantly was the prime minister or the premier or the leader of that collection of individuals was now needed the confidence of the elected members to hold that position. Okay. And if a prime minister or premier started to go off track, the members within the legislature would get rid of them. Okay, that's how the system is designed. But most people in Canada have no knowledge, no understanding of, and most people think that they're actually voting for a party, and most people in Canada do vote for a party. And you'll hear people who live in Alberta or BC or Newfoundland saying, "Well, I voted for Justin Trudeau." Well, no, you didn't. He represents a riding in Quebec. And unless you lived in that riding, whatever it is, Papineau or whatever, you didn't vote for him. And it's the same thing with any, Pierre Poilievre. Nobody can vote for Pierre Poilievre unless you live in Ottawa West.
Yeah.
So, but we diminish the value of our local representatives when we see that we're voting or think that we're voting for the leader.
Absolutely. Well, you're not just diminish, you're basically obliterating the role of the elected representative.
Yeah.
When you allow an establishment and a party to take over, and then a prime minister and the party whip and all this kind of nonsense, it ruins. So what you described originally, the Westminster parliamentary system, that's how it was designed to operate, and that's how it's almost a self-governing body.
Yeah.
Without being a laughable concept, it was actually self-governing.
No, it's a good design, and it lasted and worked pretty good. But we don't use it as it was designed, and it's like anything. The car's designed to run on gasoline or diesel. Well, if you put water in it, it's not going to work quite as well.
Yeah.
And and it's meant to drive on a road. It's and if you want to drive in the back bush, then you get a different sort of vehicle. So you use things the way they're designed for the purpose that they are. And we're not doing that with our elected representation and with our democracy.
Certainly not. Randy, we do have a guest here who's joined backstage. Gunther wants to hop on and have his say. So I'm going to bring Gunther on. And as I'm bringing him on, I hear people say that the Crown and the Governor General, their role is largely ceremonial in Canadian politics.
Not
just for anyone who's concerned or interested in what I'm saying here, the B&A Act, which is now the Constitution Act 1867, paired with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which forms our quote-unquote Constitution here in Canada. Go to the Constitution Act 1867, go to Section 12, and read it. It's called executive authority. And there's one person and one person only who's named to have sole authority over all matters of federal parliament and provincial parliaments through one other person. And it's the Governor General and the Lieutenant Governor.
Yeah, to think that it's a ceremonial role that's what we've been led to believe. Again, this is another myth, and it's, the Governor General takes on that same very fount of guardianship as the monarch does, right? And they have what is called reserve powers, but and we haven't, we've been very seldom that we've utilized the reserve powers, and that's a good thing as a statement. But back in the 1930s, the Alberta Social Credit Party decided that they would create their own currency. And the lieutenant governor said, guess what? The Constitution doesn't allow you to do that. So we're not going to proclaim your law into effect. And of course, in the 20s, there was the King and Meehan affair, and the Governor General dismissed the Prime Minister Mackenzie King at the time. So they, there has been, those reserve powers have been utilized on occasion, but generally speaking, most of our lieutenant governors and governor generals now are too stupid and lack any knowledge, and in large part, I would say maybe also integrity, to understand what their reserve powers are and to ensure that they influence our political leaders to act in accordance with the Constitution.
Very well said. Gunther, we got you on the air now. I believe you're unmuted. And for anyone who wants to say that, Randy, your examples of the Governor General and Lieutenant Governor are in the past, it happened during Stephen Harper's era. And I'll touch on that after Gunther gets a chance to say what he wants to say. So Gunther, you're on the mic there now. Go ahead. What's on your mind?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Gunther from Ontario. I'd like to say, Randy, I've never met you or seen you speak live, but I've watched you on YouTube several times, and I'd like to thank you for being as outspoken. You're the only person, one of the only persons anyway, in politics that I've ever seen with such gusto and honesty and integrity in the system. So,
well, thank you very much for the kind
word.
Thank
you for that. And I like what you said about how you decided to do things. You first listen to your conscience, and I think that is one of the biggest problems that we have with the current system. It's been so corrupted to the point that everybody is just following a set of procedures and rules that are honest people, and they're being led often by people who are corrupt, and it's the system itself not allowing people to use their conscience and think that they have to follow whatever direction they're given above them, regardless of whether that's lawful or moral, and they will do it. And this is how the system gets corrupted, I think, and that's where we're at now. It's been so far corrupted because people are just following process rather than thinking for themselves.
Well, there's all that is true. I've started doing a podcast series from my camp here in Lanark County. It's called the Scuttlebutt Lodge. It's on, if you go to my YouTube channel, my Odyssey channel, Facebook, and whatnot. And every week I do a little 15-minute story about my observations, my experience in elected office, because it's too much to digest. As I said earlier on the show, Gunter, it took me a number of years, watching intently, observing, and that was every day for a number of years before I even began to learn how the system actually works. So you can't do it justice in a half hour or an hour or even a 2 or 3 hour show. It's take a look at that. Like where it very starts with is how the political parties rig the nomination process to prevent good people from being candidates, right? And I think that was my second or third episode on the Scuttlebutt Lodge series. And you can see the past episodes on the website nomorlockdowns.ca. But if you want to learn how things actually work and why they function the way they do function, stay tuned.
Part of the problem is not so much just the legislators, but the enforcers. So our judicial system, the police, the judges, and the lawyers. I think because they're like the wall that stands between us and holding the elected officials accountable. And they seem to just follow the orders of anybody who's elected without, thinking clearly about whether or not what they're doing is right or lawful in that manner, because they're so often breaking the rules themselves, right? And yet they'll hold you accountable for not wearing a seatbelt. Oh, they'll chase you down for that. But, somebody's swindling millions of dollars out the back door. It's, everybody turns a blind eye. So, and that is the middle ground system. That's the wall between us and those that are guiding and controlling the system. And how do we reach those people, do you think?
Well, I think you have to understand that our institutions, whether it's our academia, whether it's our public health, whether it's our courts, whether it's our law enforcement, whether it's our public libraries, whatever institution you want to look at, they're all corrupt, right?
Yeah.
Like the institutions were created to safeguard the welfare in the public interest. Okay. I think what we've learned, if we haven't learned this in the last 3 years, we haven't learned anything, Gunter, and that is our institutions are just as corrupt as our political institution, where any reasonably intelligent, rational, sane person would understand that it's healthy to be outside and getting fresh air and walking on trails, and it shouldn't be and being isolated and confined in your home is not a good thing. Okay. It's not a good thing to shut down the health food store but keep the beer store open. Okay, even though I like beer and I like healthy food, it was not a smart thing to prevent people from getting physical exercise. And I could go on and on. But now we have our public libraries and our legions having drag queen shows for kids, for children. Okay, these are things that, if at best, they ought to be seen as adult entertainment, at least. But now we're bringing our little kids, and we're having our medical system encouraging young boys and girls to be confused about who they are. Like, this is not a normal situation.
No, it's not.
And again, these institutions were created for our best interest. And we see now that they don't operate in that fashion, just like our political parties.
It's plain and simple to see. I think they don't operate in that fashion.
Yeah.
So, Gunther, I'm going to offer you a chance to give us any final thoughts before we bid you adieu and wrap up for the evening.
Okay. I'll say this as a final out, because I was thinking about what you just said with what we're doing to the children, and I remember about 30 years ago I read a book by Dr. Thomas Harris called "I'm Okay, You're Okay." It's on transactional analysis and psychotherapy, right? And it sort of takes what Freud's system of id, ego, and superego, and turns it into what he calls sort of the parent, adult, and child minds, and how we get form our character and so forth. And anyway, as many psychologists will agree, as they point out, that the first 5 years of a child's life are the most formative in developing that character that you're going to grow up to be. And the fact that we're allowing this kind of stuff to happen, and no one's standing up and saying anything, even from the psychology industry, is just baffling to me, that they won't speak up and say something. That this is the root that we've known about psychology for so long, and they're allowing this kind of stuff to happen to our children. But I'll leave that as my final comment. And it was great to talk to you guys. Thanks so much, and you have a great night. And thanks again for this show.
All right. Take care, Gunther. Thanks for coming on. And as Gunther said, there's actually a famous quote. I'm stuck trying to think who said this now. But give me a child for the first 7 years of its life and I'll have it for its whole life. Meaning the propaganda that you can insert, the programming you can insert into a child in those very delicate, very absorbent 5 to 7 years of their lives. If you're masterful with your propaganda, you have that person essentially hooked. And that's a scary thought. So we're getting ready to close her down. I'm going to do the same thing for you, Randy. Give you some time at the end here to say.
Before you close it down, why don't we just show the audience of how both liberal and conservative politicians are involved in the China money, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think that would be a good thing to show people who is involved in the Canada-China Business Council, which was created by one of Jean Chrétien's in-laws, Paul Desmarais, who owned a business called Power Corporation of Canada, which has about $70 billion a year in revenue. Huge Canadian company. The board of directors of who operate the Canada-China Business Council, and let's take right there. First off, it's Paul Desmarais has passed away, but I believe that's either his son or grandson, Olivier Desmarais. But over here, the Honorable Scott Bryson. Now, people in the Maritimes should remember him. He was a conservative member of Parliament in Nova Scotia, ran for the leadership of the Conservative Party, lost, then crossed the floor and became a Liberal and became a cabinet minister, right? So there's both a Liberal and a Conservative who's involved. Next, on the next row, we have the Honorable Martin Cochon, who was a Liberal cabinet minister for many years as well, and now working for a legal firm. And of course, if we go down to the next row of people on here, and this is an interesting one, right in the middle, Sam, good old Sam. He figured prominently because he's vice president of SNC Lavalin, right? And you just keep going down, and like this is riddled with both conservative, liberal insiders and those who, they swing both ways. Some of them, like liberal or conservative, it doesn't make any difference. But many of the banking industry, the major Canadian law firms, McCarthy Tetro, BMO, these guys are all in on the game, right? Big corporate interests. Oh, and here, this one, the Honorable James Moore, federal cabinet minister during the Harper era. This is what people need to understand, is who's actually driving the ship. Direct head of BMO Capital Markets. These are the people who have facilitated, encouraged, and benefited by colluding with the communist Chinese and many others to ensure that our democracy serves them at the expense of you.
Jesus. Just that list alone of those board of directors and what that is, the Canada-China Business Council. Guys, screw your heads on tight as Canadians and think about what's happening to our country. You've heard it from Randy here all night. You've heard it from a liberal. You've seen that it's liberals and it's conservatives. It's the system that's being used. It doesn't matter which party it is. So,
we're the ones that are being used, right? We're being used to legitimize their unlawful, illegal, unethical actions. Because every time we vote for these people, we legitimize the protection racket.
The protection racket. I like that. It is a protection racket, and it is a government mafia. That's what it is. So we do have one of our other co-hosts here who just joined backstage. He just wants to come on and thank you for joining us this evening, taking the time out of your busy schedule.
I think it's important. We need to continually help educate and inform people of what the real world is, and also not to believe or fall victim to this this view that, and political parties make you think this as well. Political parties make you believe that you are helpless on your own, that you are just a grain of sand on the beach to be pushed and pulled with the ebb and flow of the tide, and that the only one who can actually help you is the political party, the protection racket. Take your own initiative, defend your own freedom, speak truthfully and honestly, and that will do it.
God bless. I love the message. It's what every Canadian needs to hear. So thank you for coming on, Randy.
2022 Freedom Convoy, what's up? Let's roll. My people want their freedom back, so please take off that dumbass mask and smile at your neighbor. If all we need is love, then why you trying to be a hater? First you say that I'm a racist, and then you run away and take a fucking hiatus, while 38 million people are waiting, and this guy's supposed to be the leader of a nation? Shit, my people want their freedom back, so please take off that dumbass mask and smile at a neighbor. If all we need is love, then why you trying to be a hater? They trying to say that this is hate speech and trying to take away our freedom, but the whole world is watching and everyone can see us, so we better speak up. Mr. Prime Minister, before you aim and shoot and label patriot Canadians racist and cruel, misogynistic and extremist too, you need to try to provide me with some proof, cause all I can see for miles in the streets is peace, love and unity in every color and creed. And besides all the Cisco trucks, truthfully, you the only motherfucker in town who got beef. So disrespectfully, I would have to disagree and say that you're a liar, but hey, that's just me. Now on the count of three, everybody say with me, truck you, Trudeau. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Truck you, Trudeau. Truck you, Trudeau. Truck you, Trudeau. Now say it with authority this time and let them know. Truck you, Trudeau. Truck you, Trudeau. Truck you, Trudeau. This is for the fringe minority, come on, here we go. Yo, my people don't agree with that. I think I need a trucker hat. Someone high five your neighbor, cause what we need is love, stop being such a hater. They trying to say that this is hate speech? What? And trying to take away my freedom, but the whole world is watching and everyone can see us, so I better speak up. Hey yo, give me the microphone, because my whole fucking country is under the microscope, and the whole world is watching and listening with the stethoscope. They got their eyes on their phones and their fingers on the pulse. Everybody wants to know how it's all gonna unfold. For the first time in 24 months we got some hope, and Trudeau is so shook, it's like he just seen a ghost. You can hear his heartbeat from the east to the west coast. Shh, quarantining into Fino. How incredibly convenient. I speak for the people, and we will not condone with this tyranny and emo. No. If you're Canadian and proud, raise a fist to the clouds. Everyone together now, at the top of your motherfucking lungs, yell it loud. Truck you, Trudeau. Truck you, Trudeau. Truck you, Trudeau. Remove the fucking mandates and let my people go. Truck you, Trudeau. Truck you, Trudeau. Truck you, Trudeau. If you can't take the heat, then don't stand by the stove. Truck you, Trudeau. Truck you, Trudeau. Truck you, Trudeau. 2022 Freedom Convoy, let's roll.
Look out, Peter Polyev, I'm feeling mighty rapey.